Here's a gentle yet powerful hook for the start of your speech in the Mr. Rogers-inspired style. Have you ever watched two people who used to be close suddenly drift apart and wondered why? Sometimes even countries that once shared memories, traditions, and homes find themselves on opposite sides of something very painful. Today I want to tell you a story about that. A story of closeness, conflict, and the quiet strength of hope. It's the story of Russia and Ukraine. Sometimes the world feels very big, and the news can seem far away. But even when something happens, in a place you've never been, it can still touch your heart. There's a place called Ukraine. It's filled with people just like you and me. Children playing, parents working, grandparents tending gardens. For a long time, they lived with hopes and dreams just like all of us. But then one day something terrible happened. Another country, Russia, decided to bring war to Ukraine. That war meant loud sounds, broken homes, and frightened faces. It meant people leaving everything behind, with only what they could carry. The world didn't stay quiet. People came forward. Some sent blankets, some sent medicine, some sent prayers. Many countries tried to help, because when people hurt, others often try to heal. Still, the war goes on, and that's the hard part, because sometimes adults can argue in very loud and hurtful ways when they don't know how else to talk. But in the middle of all the noise, we can still find quiet moments of love, neighbors protecting neighbors, strangers offering food, songs sung underground in shelters. Even in the dark, there is light. And maybe one day the people in charge will remember what the people on the ground already know, that peace is possible when we listen, when we care, and when we remember that every person matters. Let me know if you'd like this speech adapted for children, for video narration, or in another emotional. Ukraine is not just a name on a map. It's a land where people live, love, and grow. From the golden wheat fields to the deep forests and historic cities, Ukraine is a place that many call home. For generations, families have lived on this land, building memories, sharing traditions, and creating communities full of warmth and resilience. When war touches a place like this, it does more than just damage buildings. It shakes the deep sense of belonging that people feel in their homes, their neighborhoods, their schools, and their streets. A home is more than walls and a roof. It's where you feel safe. It's where your stories begin. For Ukrainian people, this sense of home was suddenly shattered. Sirens replaced silence, shelters replaced schools, and fear entered spaces once filled with joy. Children who once played in the parks began hiding underground. Grandparents who once planted flowers in the spring found their gardens abandoned. The emotional harm of war touches everything. It separates families, forces people to leave behind the places they love, and replaces comfort with uncertainty. The bond people have with their land and culture is deep, and when that is threatened, the pain goes beyond words. Even those who stay during war face the weight of seeing their familiar surroundings changed by destruction. The streets they walked now hold memories of danger. The places they knew are no longer the same. This emotional loss is something that doesn't always appear in the headlines, but it is one of the most painful parts of war. People don't just lose things. They lose a part of themselves, a part rooted in place, tradition, and memory. The story of Ukraine's suffering is also a story of how deeply people are connected to the places they call home. When countries change, it can make others feel uneasy or even afraid. Ukraine, over the years, had been moving closer to Europe, building stronger ties with the European Union and expressing interest in joining NATO, a group of Western nations formed for mutual protection. To Ukraine, this meant safety, opportunity, and a future aligned with democracy and independence. But to Russia, it looked like something different. Russian leaders saw Ukraine's shift as a loss of influence and a growing threat on their border. In their eyes, NATO was not just a group of friends, it was a powerful alliance that could one day turn against them. This fear grew slowly, fed by history, pride, and suspicion. Russia and Ukraine share not only a long border but also a long, tangled history. For many years under the Soviet Union, Ukraine was not allowed full independence. After Ukraine gained its freedom in 1991, Russia never truly let go of its influence, especially in regions with Russian-speaking populations. As Ukraine grew more independent, Russia feared losing what it saw as a historic part of its sphere. Fear, especially when mixed with pride and the desire to control, can lead to harsh decisions. Russia's leadership feared that Ukraine's independence and closeness to the West would leave them surrounded, weakened, and isolated. Instead of choosing cooperation or dialogue, they chose aggression. What began as political tension grew into military buildup and finally an invasion. Fear had turned into action, but not the kind that builds bridges. It was the kind that destroys them. Change in one nation doesn't always mean danger to another. But when fear takes over, people often imagine the worst, and that fear can lead to choices that hurt not only others, but also themselves in the end. Conflict often begins long before the first shot is fired. It starts in the quiet spaces where misunderstanding grows and control is valued more than cooperation. In the case of Russia and Ukraine, this conflict didn't appear overnight. It was the result of years of political tension, mistrust, and an ongoing struggle for influence. Russia viewed Ukraine not just as a neighbor, but as a country within its historical and cultural reach. The idea of Ukraine becoming more independent, choosing its own alliances, and shaping its future away from Russian influence was seen by Russian leadership as a rejection. Instead of accepting this choice, Russia tried to control it. Misunderstanding played a big role. Russian authorities claimed that parts of Ukraine were not truly separate, that Russian-speaking communities needed protection, and that Western influence was corrupting. These claims ignored the reality that millions of Ukrainians wanted freedom to decide their own path. They wanted democracy, not domination. This desire was not a threat, but it was treated as one. Control became the response. By taking Crimea in 2014 and backing armed groups in eastern Ukraine, Russia tried to keep its grip tight. The use of force was not just a show of strength, it was a message that Ukraine was not free to choose. The world watched as the balance between nations tipped. What could have been a respectful separation became a painful clash. The failure to understand each other's goals, combined with a desire for dominance, turned disagreement into disaster. True security comes from trust and mutual respect, not control. But when leaders seek to dominate rather than understand, they risk everything. Misunderstanding becomes fear. Fear becomes control. And control becomes war. In the case of Russia and Ukraine, that pattern led to the breaking of peace and the beginning of tragedy. When war comes, the world often focuses on armies, leaders, and strategies. But the true heart of the story lies with the people who live through it, ordinary people who never chose the war yet are forced to endure it. In Ukraine, when the full-scale invasion began in 2022, many citizens did not run or give in. Instead, they showed remarkable courage in the face of fear. Teachers became organizers of shelter. Bakers delivered bread under shell fire. Teenagers volunteered to make camouflage nets or carry supplies. Mothers carried their children across borders while fathers stayed behind to defend their towns. People who had never held a weapon before stood guard at checkpoints. Others chose to resist in quieter ways, through kindness, through songs, through standing tall when the world around them was falling apart. Courage wasn't always loud. Sometimes it was silent, like the grandmother who refused to leave her garden, or the doctor who kept treating patients even when the hospital had no electricity. These small acts formed the foundation of national spirit. Ukrainian artists painted murals on bombed walls. Musicians played in bunkers to calm frightened children. Even under the threat of airstrikes, many chose to marry, to laugh, to hope. This everyday bravery reminded the world that war is not just about destruction, it's also about resilience. These ordinary people became symbols of strength. They reminded everyone watching that dignity can survive even in the darkest times. The courage of Ukrainians was not about being unafraid. It was about facing fear and choosing to live anyway. In every corner of Ukraine, from broken cities to rural villages, people stood up for their right to be free. And in doing so, they proved that true bravery often comes from the most unexpected places. In the middle of war's destruction, something powerful always rises: people who help. When Ukraine was attacked, it wasn't just soldiers who stepped forward. All across the world, individuals, groups, and countries became helpers. They opened their borders to refugees, sent medicine and food, and offered shelter to those fleeing from danger. Neighboring countries like Poland welcomed millions, not as strangers, but as neighbors in need. Volunteers stood at train stations with blankets, toys, and warm meals. Doctors flew in from different continents to treat the wounded. Teachers created makeshift schools for children who had lost everything. Some helpers gave money. Others gave time, love, and comfort. Across the internet, people donated clothes, shared truthful stories, and spread messages of hope. Even inside Ukraine, those not fighting found ways to support. Families shared homes. Mechanics fixed broken vehicles for free. Restaurant owners cooked for soldiers and families without charge. These acts may seem small compared to the size of war, but they created something powerful: connection. In a time of great division and suffering, helpers reminded everyone that goodness still lives. Children drew pictures of peace and mailed them to soldiers. Strangers in faraway places wrote letters of hope to families they had never met. Aid. Workers risked their lives to deliver supplies to towns under fire. These moments of help were like lanterns glowing in a dark night. They didn't stop the war, but they gave people the strength to survive another day. When people help during war, it reminds us that no matter how loud hate becomes, love speaks too. It may whisper in small ways, but it never disappears. These helpers, seen and unseen, stood on the side of humanity. They showed the world that even in the worst times, kindness chooses to show up, and that is a kind of quiet victory. Peace is not just the silence that comes after the last gun is fired. Real peace is deeper than the end of violence. It is the slow, careful process of rebuilding what was broken: homes, cities, relationships, and hearts. In the war between Russia and Ukraine, peace will never mean simply stopping the fighting. It will mean helping the millions who lost everything find a way to live again. Buildings can be repaired with bricks, but trust takes much longer to restore. Many people have lost family members, neighbors, and friends. Children have grown up surrounded by fear. Their memories are shaped by explosions, sirens, and shadows. True peace means helping them feel safe again. It means healing not just wounds of the body, but also of the mind. It means finding ways for former enemies to talk, to listen, and to understand. Peace will also mean justice, listening to the voices of those who suffered and making sure their pain is not forgotten. Forgiveness may take time. Understanding may be slow. But without these things, silence can still hold the echoes of violence. Peace needs truth, compassion, and patience. In Ukraine, rebuilding will take more than materials. It will need the strength of the people who never gave up. It will need leaders who choose understanding over pride. It will need neighbors who once feared each other to find common ground. Around the world, many people hope for the war to end. But the real hope is not just for the end of battle. It is for the beginning of something better. A future where children grow up without fear, where people live with dignity, where borders are not lines of conflict but places of cooperation. That kind of peace is hard, but it is worth every effort. Here is the conclusion of the entire speech in a calm, thoughtful, and compassionate tone, continuing in the spirit of the rest. And so, dear neighbor, the story of Russia and Ukraine is not just about politics or war. It's about people. People who remember where they come from, who dare to hope for something better, and who stand tall even when the ground shakes beneath them. It's a story filled with sorrow, but also with strength, with broken homes, but unbroken hearts. Through all the noise of conflict, what echoes the loudest is the courage of those who continue to care, to rebuild, to believe. And maybe, just maybe, if we listen with kindness and look with understanding, we can help shape a world where stories like this don't have to be repeated but remembered with compassion so peace has room to grow.